My phone rang and the caller ID showed Mom. I sighed, a familiar tightness starting in my chest. It wasn't that I didn't love my parents, Robert and Caroline. It was that calls from them, especially unexpected ones, usually meant they needed something. And what they needed, I often suspected, was more than I could give, and certainly more than they deserved. I was Scarlett, a graphic designer who lived a quiet, structured life. A life built on careful planning and hard work, largely because I'd learned early on not to expect much from anyone else. Especially not from my family. I answered. My mother's voice was thin, reedy with a panic I rarely heard. Scarlett, darling, thank God you answered. Mom? What's wrong? It's Audrey. Her business. It's failed. Catastrophically. Caroline's carefully constructed socialite composure was gone, replaced by raw fear. There's a penalty. A huge one. $80,000, Scarlett. By the end of the week oh, it's awful. My father got on the line, his voice tight with suppressed fury and desperation. Scarlett, we are in a situation. Audrey's liabilities are substantial. If we don't cover this, it will reflect very badly on all of us. My reputation, your mother's standing, everything we've built is at risk. $80,000. My breath hitched. That was a significant portion of my savings, the result of years of freelancing late into the night, saying no to trips, living frugally. It felt like a physical blow, hearing that number tied to their panic. $80,000? I repeated, my voice flat. That's a lot. We know, sweetheart, my mother said, her voice softening into a pleading tone I also recognized, the one she used when she wanted something big. But we'll make it right. Your father and I will put the lake house in your name. As security. You've always loved that place. It can be yours. Officially. The lake house. The old, slightly too small cabin with the rickety dock and the smell of pine and damp earth. It was the backdrop to almost every genuinely happy memory I had of my childhood, a stark contrast to the formal, often tense atmosphere of our main house. It was the only place I ever felt like I truly belonged, like I could just be. The idea of it being mine, it was a powerful lure. You'll transfer the title? To me, I asked, the skeptic in me warring with that hopeful little girl who still craved a real place in the family. Immediately, darling. As soon as the funds clear, my father assured too quickly. Please, Scarlett. We have nowhere else to turn. No one else can help us like this. Audrey's voice, distant but audible, drifted from the background, sharp and impatient. Is she saying yes or not? This needs to happen today. A wave of resentment washed over me. Audrey. Always Audrey. Her lavish lifestyle, her failed ventures, her endless needs, always subsidized by my parents, while I navigated student loans and built my career brick by brick. The constant favoritism, the overlooked birthdays, the casual disregard for my accomplishments compared to Audrey's heavily promoted, often superficial successes. I need a little time to think, I said, my voice tight. Time? Scarlett, we don't have time, my mother wailed. I'll call you back in an hour, I repeated firmly, hanging up before they could argue further. My mind raced. Give them the money? The thought was terrifying. Lose the lake house? The thought was heartbreaking. Trust them? That was the most terrifying thought of all. I immediately called Daniel. He was a lawyer, a friend from years ago who had a reputation for being sharp and ethical. More importantly, he knew my family dynamic better than almost anyone outside of it, thanks to years of my venting. Daniel, I need your help, I said the moment he picked up. And I need you to be brutally honest. 20 minutes later, I was in his surprisingly cluttered office, still in my work-from-home clothes. Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying me with a knowing look. Your parents called, didn't they? I nodded, explaining the situation, the $80,000, the lake house promise. Okay, he said, running a hand through his hair. Professional opinion? Don't do it. Not a dime. My heart sank. But the lake house? They said they'd give me the lake house. Daniel sighed. And you believe them? I looked down at my hands. I want to. I know, he said gently. But wanting to doesn't protect you. Look, if you're going to do this anyway despite my advice, we have to protect you. Completely. He pulled a legal pad towards him. We're drafting a loan agreement. A real one. Not just repayment terms. We need clauses about the collateral. The lake house title transfer has to be legally binding and happen immediately. We need clauses about full disclosure of their financial state. And we need serious consequences for misrepresentation or failure to comply. We need to make it ironclad. They'll never sign it, I said, picturing their faces. Then you don't give them the money, Daniel said, starting to write. Simple as that. No signed agreement. No 80 grand. Their choice. 2 hours later, document in hand, I stood outside my parents' imposing front door. The air inside felt heavy, a mix of my mother's nervous floral scent and something else, desperation. Audrey was lounging on the sofa, scrolling through her phone, looking utterly detached from the crisis that was apparently unfolding. What's this? Caroline asked, frowning as I presented the neatly typed pages. Loan agreement, I said, keeping my voice steady. Standard stuff, Daniel drew it up. You put the lake house title in my name, I give you the 80,000. You repay it with interest within 2 years, as we discussed. Robert's face darkened instantly. You don't trust us? Would you hand over $80,000 to anyone without paperwork? I countered, echoing Daniel's earlier point. Audrey finally looked up, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. Wow, Scarlett. Real nice. They're our parents. Exactly, I replied, meeting her gaze. Then they shouldn't have a problem signing a document that ensures everyone is protected and the agreement is clear. Caroline's hands trembled slightly as she took the papers. She scanned the first page, her frown deepening. This seems excessive. It's standard legal procedure for a loan this size, I said calmly. Any lawyer would advise it. We don't have time to consult lawyers. Robert snapped, his voice rising. The deadline. Then sign, I finished, holding out the pen. Or I walk out that door, and you can figure something else out. They exchanged a look or a mixture of anger, panic, and resignation. Their need for the money outweighed their pride. They signed, both Robert and Caroline, right there on Daniel's carefully drafted agreement. They barely skimmed the first page, too desperate for the cash, too certain that their quiet, reliable daughter wouldn't actually enforce anything. That night, I transferred the money. All 80,000. Seeing the number leave my account sent a shiver down my spine. It was gone. Everything I'd worked so hard for vanished in a single transaction. Caroline hugged me later, tearful, going on about how I'd saved them, how I was their rock. Audrey just rolled her eyes and went back to her phone. Robert promised the lake house title transfer would begin immediately the next morning. As I drove home, my hands shook so badly I had to pull over. I felt sick, scared, and stupid. I called my friend Layla. Hey, she answered, her voice cheerful. Everything okay? I just gave my parents $80,000. I blurted out. Silence for a moment. Scarlett. No. Daniel said not to without solid. I got a solid agreement. I interrupted, my voice trembling slightly. They signed it. But I feel like I just made the biggest mistake of my life. Okay, Layla said, her tone shifting to concern. You got proof. You're not stupid. You're cautious. Just breathe. And watch them like a hawk. Oh, I plan to, I whispered, starting the car again. The fear was still there, but beneath it, a spark of something cold and determined was beginning to glow. They thought they had me. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Weeks passed, then a couple of months. Every time I called to ask about the lake house title, there was a new excuse. The lawyer was out of town. There was a holdup at the county registry. Unexpected paperwork surfaced. The delays felt deliberate, the excuses increasingly transparent. My gut twisted tighter with each call. The knot of suspicion I'd felt the night I signed the agreement was growing into a hard, heavy stone in my chest. I started my own quiet investigation. Using my graphic design skills, the meticulous attention to detail, the ability to spot tiny inconsistencies, I dug into online property records, local government sites, even archived news articles about Audrey's past business ventures. I found things that didn't quite add up, mentions of properties changing hands, shell corporations, but nothing concrete proving the lake house hadn't just been delayed, but actively withheld. Driven by a need for answers I wasn't getting over the phone, I decided to make a surprise visit on a Sunday afternoon. I told them I was in the area and wanted to drop off some things. When I arrived, their cars were in the driveway, suggesting they were home, but the house was quiet. I let myself in through the side door they often left unlocked during the day, a habit that went back to my childhood. Voices carried from the sunroom, relaxed and easy. I froze, just out of sight, near the threshold. I still can't believe she fell for it, Audrey's voice, light and dismissive. $80,000. Just like that. My hand, reaching to knock on the sunroom door frame, stopped midair. Our little bailout fund worked perfectly, Caroline's voice, laced with amusement. Just like old times. She always was the responsible one, wasn't she? Easy to predict. Robert chuckled. The best part is she thinks she's getting the lake house. As if we didn't sign that over to Audrey 2 years ago to cover her first business failure. The world tilted. 2 years ago? My head swam. They'd promised me something they didn't even own anymore? Something they'd already given to Audrey for a previous bailout? But what about that agreement she made you sign? Audrey sounded slightly concerned now. Please, Caroline scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. It's Scarlett. She'd never enforce it. She's too desperate for our approval, too afraid of confrontation. She'll roll over like she always does. Besides, Robert added, his tone confident. We can just claim the money was a gift. She's been giving us money her whole life, one way or another. No judge would side with her. My hand fumbled in my purse, finding the folded loan agreement Daniel had drafted. I carried it everywhere, a weird, paranoid habit. Now I knew why. Still, Audrey mused, I think we should be careful. She was awfully firm about that paper. Sweetheart, Caroline said, her voice dripping with smugness. I've been managing your sister's expectations her entire life. Trust me. Now, about that down payment for your new car. I didn't stay to hear more. My legs carried me back to my car on autopilot. I sat there, engine off, the keys in my hand, their words echoing. 2 years ago. Fell for it, bailout fund. She'll roll over. Just a gift. The pain was immense, a raw, tearing wound. But beneath it, something else was stirring, cold and hard and utterly unlike the desperate little girl they still thought I was. It was anger. A deep, burning, furious anger that wiped away the hurt and replaced it with a terrifying clarity. My phone buzzed. Layla calling. I answered. Hey, everything okay? She asked. Haven's heard from you. They lied to me, Layla, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. About the lake house. They already gave it to Audrey. 2 years ago. They planned all of it. Silence on the other end. Then, oh my God, Scarlett. Are you okay? Where are you? In my car. Outside their house. Get out of there. Right now. Drive straight to my place. 20 minutes later, I was sitting on Layla's couch, a mug of coffee warming my hands. Layla paced in front of me, her eyes wide with disbelief and fury on my behalf. We need to call Daniel, she said. Right now. Not yet, I said, pulling the signed loan agreement from my purse. My hands were steady now. The tremors were gone, replaced by a cold, focused energy. Scarlett, they stole from you. $80,000. Do they? I said, smoothing out the document on the coffee table. They tried to. They thought they were so clever, getting me to empty my savings. They thought I was still that little girl who'd do anything for a scrap of attention. But Daniel added some interesting clauses to this document. Clauses about misrepresentation. About failure to disclose assets. About fraud. They signed it, Layla. Without reading. They signed their own sentence. Layla stopped pacing, looking at me. You're scaring me a little. Good, I said, a grim smile touching my lips. Because I'm about to scare them a lot more. I pulled out my phone and transferred my remaining money to a new account Daniel had helped me set up, one they knew nothing about. Then I called Daniel. They lied, I told him, recounting what I overheard. The lake house was gone years ago. They're calling the money a gift. They think I won't fight. Okay, Scarlett, Daniel said, his voice serious. Take a deep breath. You have the signed agreement. That's powerful. Their claim of gift will be hard to prove against a formal loan document. And the lake house situation, that's fraud related to collateral. It's more than that, Daniel, I said, a new thought taking shape. They were so arrogant, so certain I'd just roll over. What else have they been certain I wouldn't notice? What do you mean? My parents, I said, my voice low. They've always been creative with finances, especially around Audrey's needs. And Robert's business. I've seen things, heard things over the years that didn't quite sit right. Little inconsistencies. Daniel, I think this goes deeper. I think they've been doing things like this for a long time. And I think they might have used me before in ways I don't even know yet. Daniel was quiet for a moment. That changes things. Significantly. If there's a pattern of financial deception, potentially involving identity theft or other crimes, that's a different ballgame. That's not just breach of contract. That's criminal. They thought I was weak because I was quiet, I said, looking at the signed agreement again. They thought because I watched and listened and didn't cause trouble, I didn't see anything. They were wrong. I saw everything. And now they're going to see exactly what I learned. The demand letter arrived at my parents' house via certified mail a week later. Daniel drafted it, a cold, formal document stating the terms of the loan agreement, the failure to transfer the lake house title, demanding full repayment of $80,000 plus interest, and explicitly mentioning that Scarlett was aware the lake house had been transferred to Audrey years prior to the loan agreement, constituting fraud and misrepresentation. It warned of immediate legal action, including potential reporting to financial authorities. I paid extra for the certified mail, tracking it online. It was signed for at 10:43 a.m. on a Tuesday. By 10:47 a.m., my phone began to explode. Calls from Robert, Caroline, a barrage of hysterical texts from Audrey. I let it ring, finishing my coffee, watching the notifications pile up. The panic radiating from the screen was palpable. It felt good. A grim, dark sort of good that settled deep in my bones. Finally, I answered a call from my mother. Her voice was shaking, vibrating with a mixture of rage and disbelief. What is this, Scarlett? What is this letter? I believe the letter is quite clear, I said, channeling Daniel's calm, professional tone. It outlines the terms of the loan agreement you signed and your failure to meet your obligations. Obligations? We're your family. You can't do this to us. You made that very clear when you transferred the lake house to Audrey 2 years before asking me for $80,000, I replied evenly. Silence. A stunned silence on the other end. Then, Robert's voice, tight with anger. You were at the house? You were listening. The side door was unlocked, I said, a faint smile touching my lips. You taught me to use it. Remember all those times you locked me out when I was a kid? Now listen here, young lady, Robert began, his voice rising. No, I cut him off, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. You listen. You have 30 days to repay the loan in full, with interest, exactly as outlined in the agreement you signed. Otherwise, I file suit. And given the circumstances, including the fraudulent transfer of the lake house and your misrepresentation, I will be pursuing all available legal avenues, including referring this matter to relevant authorities for potential criminal investigation. Criminal investigation? Caroline choked out. You wouldn't dare. Try me, I said. Audrey got on the phone, her voice shrill with panic. Scarlett, you can't. The lake house is mine. This is crazy. About that, I said, allowing myself a hint of satisfaction. Daniel's initial look into the property records for the lake house shows some interesting discrepancies. And given the context of your parents admitting they transferred it to you years ago, that title transfer looks problematic. Potentially fraudulent. Another silence, heavier this time, filled with unspoken fear. What did you do? Caroline whispered, her voice barely audible. Me? Nothing yet, I said. But imagine what Daniel might find if he digs deeper into the family's financial history. Or what an anonymous tip to the right authorities might uncover when words like fraudulent transfer, misrepresentation, and identity theft come up. I paused. I learned from the best, didn't I, Mom? I looked at my watch. 30 days. Not a minute more. I hung up and immediately blocked all their numbers. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was pure, exhilarating adrenaline. My phone rang. Daniel. They got the letter, he said the moment I answered. How do you know? Your mother just called my office screaming about ungrateful daughters, family loyalty, and frivolous lawsuits. It was illuminating. I laughed, a short, sharp sound. Did you record it? Always, he said dryly. She threatened to sue me for malpractice, claimed I manipulated you. I reminded her she signed a legally binding document without reading it, and that aiding and abetting fraud is a serious offense. Then I hung up. He paused. They're rattled, Scarlett. But they're not going to back down easily. They'll fight. Let them, I said, pulling up the digital folder Daniel had created, labeled Family Business. That's exactly what I'm counting on. Over the next few weeks, Daniel and I methodically built the case. He delved deeper into public records, business filings related to Robert and Audrey, and financial databases. I continued my own quiet research online, following digital breadcrumbs related to Audrey's past ventures and the family's social and financial connections. The subtle social pressure I'd initiated began to yield results. Not direct confrontations, but questions whispered, invitations subtly withdrawn. Caroline's carefully cultivated social facade was starting to show cracks. Then, the first unexpected contact came. Mason. Audrey's former business partner from one of her earlier failed ventures, the one that apparently prompted the fraudulent lake house transfer. He messaged me anonymously at first, referencing the rumors circulating about my family's financial troubles and the lake house. I was cautious, vetting him through Daniel. Mason was legitimate. He'd been significantly burned by Audrey's reckless spending and deceptive practices, and felt her parents had actively helped her hide the extent of the damage. He wasn't necessarily seeking revenge for me, but he wanted to see Audrey and her enablers face consequences. I met Mason at a neutral location with Daniel present, just in case. Mason provided internal emails, financial statements, and personal accounts from his time working with Audrey that painted a clear picture of her financial irresponsibility and the lengths her parents went to cover for her. He confirmed the lake house transfer was indeed to settle urgent debts from that specific venture, orchestrated by Robert. He mentioned seeing other questionable transactions and documents over the years, things that didn't seem above board, sometimes involving other family accounts he didn't fully understand. His information provided critical context and pointed Daniel towards specific areas to investigate. Shortly after, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Olivia, an old friend of my mother's, someone who had known our family for decades. She sounded hesitant, burdened. "Scarlett," she said softly. I heard something, and I feel like I have to tell you." She spoke about a time years ago, when a grandparent had left a significant sum specifically for my graduate school education. The money had mysteriously vanished just before I was supposed to start applying. Olivia, who had been loosely involved in managing some family affairs back then, had always suspected Robert and Caroline had diverted it. Now, with the rumors flying about the lake house and the money, she felt sure. They had taken my graduate school fund and used it to bail out another of Audrey's early, failed business attempts. Hearing this confirmed the deep, systemic nature of their betrayal. It wasn't just the $80,000 in the lake house. They had been stealing from me, diverting resources meant for my future, to prop up Audrey's lifestyle for years. The pain was sharp, but it solidified my resolve. This wasn't just about getting my money back. It was about confronting a lifetime of being treated as less important, less deserving than Audrey, and being financially exploited by the very people who were supposed to protect me. Daniel used Mason's and Olivia's information to refine his investigation. He requested broader financial documents, subpoenaing records related to Robert's business and various entities Audrey had been involved with. He started seeing patterns, complex transfers, obscured assets, and, repeatedly, documents with signatures that looked off. Specifically, he found multiple documents, loan applications, tax forms, internal business agreements spanning almost a decade, all bearing a signature purportedly belonging to Scarlett. Signatures I knew instantly were not mine. The realization was chilling. They hadn't just lied and stolen my savings. They had been using my identity, putting me at financial risk, racking up liabilities in my name for years, all without my knowledge. This wasn't just fraud, it was identity theft. The scale of the deception was staggering. It explained so much: why I sometimes got strange junk mail about financial products, why certain online accounts seemed to exist that I didn't remember setting up. They had been treating my identity as just another family resource to be manipulated. Daniel identified Thomas, an accountant who had worked closely with Robert's firm for years, as the notary or preparer on many of these forged documents. Daniel reached out to him carefully. Thomas, facing the prospect of being implicated in years of serious financial fraud and identity theft, agreed to cooperate in exchange for immunity. Thomas's testimony was damning. He confirmed that Robert, often with Caroline's knowledge and sometimes involving Audrey, had routinely instructed him or others to forge my signature on various financial and legal documents. They used these forged papers to secure loans, move money, obscure assets, and finance Audrey's ventures or cover Robert's own financial shortfalls. Thomas revealed that Audrey kept a private, secure safety deposit box where they stored sensitive documents related to these schemes. News that Thomas was cooperating sent a tremor through my family. They knew he had the insider knowledge. Panic set in. I saw online that Audrey suddenly posted about needing to clear out some old business storage, a flimsy excuse. Daniel confirmed that bank records showed activity related to her safety deposit box. This was it. The smoking gun. They were trying to get to the evidence. Daniel moved immediately, obtaining an emergency court order to freeze and secure the contents of Audrey's safety deposit box at the bank before she could access it. He called me the moment it was confirmed. They tried Scarlett, Daniel said, his voice tight. Audrey was at the bank, trying to get into the box. But the order went through. It's secured. Nothing went in, nothing came out. A wave of relief, sharp and profound, washed over me, quickly followed by a cold sense of triumph. Checkmate, I whispered. They're running out of options, Daniel agreed. The hearing is tomorrow. The contents of that box will be opened in court. They know it's over. I spent the rest of the day preparing with Daniel, going over timelines, reviewing the evidence Mason, Olivia, and Thomas had provided. I used my design skills to create clear visual charts of the money trail and the pattern of forged signatures, making the complex fraud easy to understand. The courthouse hallway felt like a battleground. On one side, Robert, Caroline, and Audrey huddled with their lawyer, their faces strained and pale, but still trying to project an air of defiant confidence. Audrey shot venomous glares across the hall. On the other side stood Daniel and I, quiet but resolute. Thomas sat alone on a bench, looking terrified but steadfast. Their lawyer approached. "Last chance, Scarlett," he said, his voice low. "We can settle this privately. Avoid a very public, very unpleasant spectacle." "Not anymore," Daniel replied, holding up the copy of the court order for the safety deposit box. Audrey's face went white. Caroline's perfect posture crumpled slightly. Robert just stared, his jaw clenched. They knew the box held the undeniable truth. The bailiff called the case. As we filed into the courtroom, Audrey hissed at Thomas. "Traitor." He flinched but kept his gaze forward. Judge Martinez was efficient and no-nonsense. "We are here regarding evidence of potential document forgery and widespread financial fraud. The contents of safety deposit box number 412 at First National Bank have been secured under court order. A bank representative confirmed the box was sealed yesterday afternoon, shortly after Miss Audrey attempted to access it." "Attempted?" the judge asked, raising an eyebrow. "She became agitated, Your Honor," the representative stated flatly. "Security had to escort her from the premises." Audrey sank lower in her seat. "Proceed with the opening," Judge Martinez ordered. The bank representative placed the metal box on the evidence table. My heart pounded. As the key turned, it felt like years of suppressed anger, confusion, and pain were about to be unlocked. Inside were dozens of documents, neatly organized but damning. The clerk began reading them aloud. Loan applications, tax filings, property transfers, business agreements, insurance policies, all dated from years past, all bearing a signature identified as Scarlett. Their lawyer jumped up. "Objection. These are private family matters, irrelevant to the original loan. These documents were secured legally as part of an investigation into potential fraud and identity theft," Daniel countered calmly. "And we have a witness ready to testify about the authenticity of these signatures." Thomas stood up, walking shakily towards the witness stand. Audrey's face twisted with pure hatred. "You lying piece of—" "Miss Audrey." Judge Martinez slammed her gavel. "Control yourself or you will be removed." Under oath, Thomas laid it all out. He described how Robert, sometimes with Caroline present, had instructed him to forge my signature or process documents with signatures they knew were not mine. He detailed the specific transactions, how the money was used, often for Audrey's ventures, and confirmed that the signature on the Lake House transfer document was indeed a forgery. He even mentioned seeing notes or templates used to practice replicating my signature. Caroline finally broke, sobbing. "We did it for the family. Everything was for the family." She was always so difficult about money, always questioning, always refusing to help. "Objection, irrelevant and argumentative," Daniel interjected, but the judge let her continue for a moment, revealing the twisted justification. "She wouldn't just give us the money we needed," Caroline cried. We had to. We had to access her resources. It was for Audrey." "You had to steal my identity," I said, my voice clear and strong, cutting through my mother's hysteria. I stood up, facing the bench but speaking so the whole room could hear. "You had to steal my graduate fund. You had to steal my savings. You had to forge my signature for a decade. All because I wasn't an open enough resource for you. Because I worked for what I had." "You ungrateful." Audrey lunged forward, but her lawyer grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "Your Honor," Daniel said, stepping forward calmly. "Based on the extensive evidence of document forgery and identity theft presented today, spanning multiple years and transactions, we move to freeze all family and business assets pending a full criminal investigation." He then addressed the Lake House directly. "The transfer of the Lake House title to Miss Audrey is clearly shown to have involved a forged signature, rendering that transfer null and void. We request that this asset be included in the frozen accounts, its ownership determined pending investigation." "No," Caroline shrieked, standing up. "You can't. The house. Robert's business. Audrey's funds." Robert looked like he'd aged 20 years in the last hour, his face ashen. Audrey was sobbing, her perfect makeup streaked. The judge surveyed the room, her expression grim. "The evidence presented is substantial and indicates a pattern of criminal activity far exceeding a simple loan dispute. I am ordering the immediate freezing of all relevant assets belonging to Robert and Caroline, as well as those directly linked to Miss Audrey and any associated business entities, pending a full criminal investigation into financial fraud and identity theft. The matter of the Lake House ownership will be determined as part of that investigation, given the clear evidence of forgery related to its transfer." She banged her gavel. Case adjourned. As I walked out of the courtroom with Daniel, leaving my family to face the consequences of their unraveling lives, a profound sense of release washed over me. It wasn't the triumphant joy of revenge, but the quiet satisfaction of justice finally served, of a burden lifted. They had built their lives on a foundation of lies and manipulation, using me as a silent, unsuspecting resource. They thought my quiet nature was weakness, that my need for their love made me pliable. They confused my silence with submission. They never realized I was just taking notes. And in the end, those notes brought their whole world crashing down.